So hello everybody and welcome to Crew Call. Today's guest is John Lynch, 30-year veteran of the industry, having produced numerous movies and TV shows. Most recently, he was the head of worldwide production at Amazon Studios for 7 years. He was one of the chief architects of their production infrastructure, basically building it from the ground up. Welcome, John Lynch. How are you doing?
I am good. And that sounds way more impressive than it really is. Trust me. It's by the way, it's good to be here. I feel sorry that all you guys are in lockdown. It's sort of a weird time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go back to maybe less weird times. Give us a brief overview of your career. How'd you get started?
Well, when I was in college, I had worked on a couple shows one summer. And so I met a couple people. I had no intention of going to entertainment. I went to Wall Street for the first 3 years of my career. I was an analyst and then a broker because it paid better. So I was living in New York, and I loved it. I loved living in New York. I hated the work. I hated what we were doing on Wall Street. I felt like we were just lying to people just to make money. And I said, I can't do this the rest of my life. It's not that I have a soul, but I guess I have a little bit of one. Very difficult. So I didn't want to do it. So I came to the pleasant world of Hollywood. I came back. I knew a couple people, so a couple other runners I knew. They got me some work. I worked my way up. I built a company with one of my brothers at one time. Then we split up, and I built another company that did a lot of comedy and which I found much more fun. The stuff I did originally was kids shows, and they were fun to do, but it wasn't. It was interesting. You could have a great kids show, but when you're sitting there talking to your friends, nobody knows what it is. You kind of get bored of that. And then doing comedy was really fun. Andy Dick, Norm Macdonald, people like that was really fun and challenging to work with, because when you're dealing with comics, they're dark. They're from a dark world place, and a lot of comedy comes from that. But they're also, even though Andy's crazy, but there's certain things about Andy I like. He would do anything to be as funny as possible. And it was frustrating to work with him, but he had certain things that people just love. Norm Macdonald's probably the smartest human being I ever met in my life, and probably self-destructive. So it's like these guys are just, they're brilliant, but they're sort of just not, I don't know how to explain it, except for Tom Lennon and Ben Grant, the guys that created Reno 911, the most amazing guys in the world to work with. They're absolutely just wonderful because they're smart, they're hardworking, they expect you to be really good too, to do your job, but they're just a joy to have worked with. And the Jackass guys were really fun too when we did the Jackass movies. But that was a weird job for me. I didn't really have to produce anything. I basically had to make sure no one died. And that was like not as easy as it sounds. Jeff Tremaine directed and controlled the boys, but Paramount wanted an adult involved, so I got involved in it that way. But it was fun. It was fun to be a part of it. And then I went into Amazon, and I said to Amazon, look, you guys are starting a streaming company. You guys don't have any production experience. Let my production company be your production company. And after a couple meetings, they said, no, we'd rather hire you. And I hadn't had a job since I was on Wall Street. So I almost said no. And then I thought, well, worst case, I'll go back to just producing shows if I don't like this. The first 5 years at Amazon was so much fun because we got to build everything from scratch, and no one at Amazon had ever made anything before. I got there in November of 2012, and by March of 13, 4 months later, we had put up our first 14 pilots, and it wasn't that hard. And people said, "Oh, it's so much stuff," because I was the only one in the production team, and there's only like 7 of us on the team at the time. It wasn't that hard. I had to outsource all the work, bring in some really good producers that I knew to actually produce these shows, and I left it in their hands to do the work. And this was the first time I was in a position where I was working on a management side more than a producing side. And it's very similar, except you have to step back from the projects. When you work on a show, I don't know if any of you have been runners or coordinators or writer, anything on a show, all kind of become a part of it, and you're very vested in it. When you're an executive and you're doing, when I left Amazon, I was doing 200 shows worldwide. I could tell you the name of every one of them, but I couldn't tell you exactly what position they were in when we were doing them. I'd always have to talk to the producers on them, and it's a different sort of skill set, and it's very fulfilling in a different way than actually producing shows. When you produce a show, you're just like, I made this. It's like when you're a kid and your mom puts a picture on the refrigerator and you get to go, I made this. And, they put it up on the fridge, so it's good. When you make a show and someone sees it and says, hey, I saw that show you made. That was really awesome. It's really a wonderful feeling. It's an incredible feeling that you made something that someone else enjoyed or you were a part of it. And we don't all get to be, if you watch Hollywood, the red carpet is what everybody thinks Hollywood is. That is less than 1% of the people in the industry. It's not the red carpet. Ty Warren is the head of production worldwide and built Netflix. And he's a friend of mine. I asked him once, I said, Ty, you ever feel like you're in the business? He goes, what do you mean? We're not in the business as far as society is concerned because we'll never be in People magazine or working with us. And he laughed really hard. He goes, we might as well be in manufacturing because it's not glossy, whereas acting, directing, all that is very glossy. Although you're involved in working with these people all at the same time, but also a lot of people going to production don't want that. The last thing I want is to walk on a red carpet. I got a freaking face for radio. I don't want to be going in that sort of a world where it's like that. I would rather be just making things and building things. So for me, building Amazon was really fun because I got to do whatever I want because nobody knew what they were doing. It was pretty awesome. That was fun. That's my career in a nutshell. I went to Cal State LA. So I went to Cal State School.
What was the most difficult part for you, and building Amazon Studios from the ground up? I mean, because that is the part that most folks who are tuning into Crew Call are interested in. Like you said, the building something, the work, the non-red carpet, the behind the scenes, all of that. What was the most challenging thing there?
The most challenging thing was communicating with people. I'm telling you, everybody knows everything until they have to actually make it. Everybody knows this. I'll sit on a set with a director and he goes, and with special effects is the perfect example. Well, that's a 2-shot for special effects. No, it's 30 shots. You need to learn what shots mean. So our budget's 100,000, was going to turn into 2 million if you keep doing it the way you are. You need to sit down with all the people when you're making something, and you need to communicate constantly. We worked with one director who had just finished a movie that he got kicked off of. And as time went on, I realized he was kicked off for unfair reasons. And he was basically in director's hell. I sat down with him before he did a project with ours, and all I had heard were horrible things about this guy. And I sat down and I said to him, look, Mark, you're going to do this pilot, and you're going to do whatever the hell you want. But if it goes over budget, it's not going to series. That's the bottom line. Once we get started, I can't stop you. And he said, no, John, they've got me wrong on this. I'm telling you, we did a show that ran 3 years. He directed and produced on it. He was so prepared. He was so in line, but we had a long talk beforehand. I'm not saying that I made that come out, but I think when you start to lay the parameters to people and actually communicate, it changes everything. A lot of people in entertainment want to be everybody's friend who's a celebrity or director, whatever. If I'm talent friendly, they'll come to me for everything. I'm telling you right now, they want someone to lead. People want to be led. When you're in college and a professor tells you if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get an A, you're going to get an A. When you're in the working world, nobody tells you that. You're trying to figure it out. So when someone gives you a direction and parameters, it actually makes your life easier. And actually, you have to be more creative when you're in that sort of situation where you can't just spend money and go wild and let someone do whatever they want. Jon Stewart said that about his show. He said, I think we were really funny and most creative because we had such a small budget. And we couldn't go off bank. There's a bunch of pilots we did where head of the studio said, yeah, let's give them more money. And it's like, they don't need it. And what would happen is we get these meandering stories that are 10 minutes too long. And, people aren't thinking. And it's like, when you're forced to come up with answers, it helps. I listened to Michael Eisner talk once, and he said something that really hit me. He said, you should always start off with every project in a box. I'm thinking that's the most uncreative thing I ever heard. And then then when you want to go outside that box, everyone needs to talk about it. What effect it has on the overall story, what effect it has on the numbers, what effect it has on everything. But this way, everybody has to communicate and they're in line. And I thought that was pretty clever because it's true. You start off with something, there's a lot of shows that become disastrous because no one wants to take a hard lead on it. It's hard. It's hard because you're worried about everything when you're making a show. You're investing millions of dollars, and so people get a little panic. My feeling is, man, you go with your gut and you do the best thing you can, and you make a show like you do every other show because when you take a show that's a special project, that's bigger than everything else. Like if you took Game of Thrones and you tried to produce that completely different than any other show in history, you're going to have failures to it, because if the president of the United States has a heart attack and the man on the street has a heart attack, you still have to treat them both the same if you want them to live. And production's the same way. You still have to produce the show, and there's certain basic things. You have to plan. You have to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You have to adjust. When there's a major problem, you have to be ready to come up with 2 or 3 solutions for it and decide which one you're going to go with. You have to constantly stay on these things. The more you prepare, the more you prep for a production, the less problems you'll have. Pre-production is so important. And by the way, post-production starts in pre-production. People don't do that. When you do independent films, you worry about it later. When you're doing television series, you can't worry about it later. You got to lay out everything up front, or you're going to be spending extra money that isn't necessary. And therefore, you're going to be also, chances are you'll be doing less takes on the scenes that you want to shoot, because if you're spending too much money, you're going to start getting pressure that you're spending too much money. They'll be pushing back. As I meandered on from your question, I don't know if that was helpful.
No, it's great. And I'm learning that fixing it in post doesn't fly with you.
You die, and I will kick your ass if you ever say that to me on one of my sites. I'm a little guy. Fix it in post is a lazy man's way to anything. It's not fix it in post. It's like, we've effed up. We need to fix this. And you need to plan for those things. And you can. And there'll be problems. But, usually the more you prepare, the better off you are. What is it? Failing to prepare is preparing for failure, John Wooden used to say. And it's kind of true. It sounds hackneyed, but it's very true. If you don't prepare, if you go to class and you're not prepared, it sucks. If you go through life and you're not preparing for each day, it sucks. I had a professor once tell me the difference between a job and a career was 2 hours a day. And he's right. In those 2 hours, you're prepping yourself for that day or hour, whatever you do, It does make a difference. It does make a difference.
That's cool. That's good advice. What advice would you have for PAs and interns just starting out? The head of production is about the opposite end of the scale for most of the people listening to this. What advice would you give them, or someone who was like you, your 20-year-old self?
Because everybody's path is different. I had learned one thing. I've now interviewed about 70 people for this thing, because it is something that's really important, is how you get started, how you get your job going, how you do this. I will say about 85% of the people that I interviewed got their first job by knowing someone, but not at the top, and it's at the bottom or at the level they're in. Runners get other runners' jobs. Coordinators get other coordinators' jobs. So when you're starting your career off and in school and you're doing your school projects and stuff, you need to know everybody. You need to start making everybody, because what happens is someone's on a show and all of a sudden one of the runners doesn't show up and they go, "Hey, anyone know anyone?" And someone just goes, "Yeah, I can call my friend right now." That's how we kind of got started. Is I had done some work for a guy named Don Kirshner, and I was a runner for very little while before I became a coordinator, only because I kept showing up to work earlier than everyone else and leaving after everyone else, mostly because I had really nowhere to go. But it was, but I found out in that time, I would listen. I didn't ask a million questions of people, because I started to realize when you keep asking questions of the people, like the DP or the producers, the directors, after a while, you're a pain in the ass, So you need to observe and learn and absorb this. So many people go, "Well, I've seen it on sets." They'll go to the DP. "Well, how do you do this? How do you do that?" And the DP finally goes, "Look, kid, I got to do this show. You can ask one question a day, maybe, but don't be a suck ass, because people see right through that. What you want to do is observe and learn." I remember when I started in the industry, we had 2-inch tape. And I remember thinking, okay, 2-inch tape. We're switching to 1-inch tape. What does that mean? And at the time, you had the camera and it was wired to a big box that had the 1-inch tape in it, and you had to run behind the cameraman to keep up. And then matter of fact, in the matter of like 6 years, it went all the way down to the beta tapes, and now everything's digital. But over that period of time, it was like all this bulk we had to deal with. But I would show up early and make sure we have them all marked. I would go to the post bays and grab the tapes after post, make sure everything was marked right. I would double check all this stuff. And by doing that, I learned every area in the business pretty decently. I am the worst in an edit room. I have yet in my whole career to be able to stay awake through a whole session. I find it to be the dullest process in the world. But I also realized I know what everyone in that room does. And I have an idea of what it costs or how long it takes to do stuff. And part of that was just by sitting in there and trying to absorb when I could. And the same thing for being on set. If I was a runner, I would walk around set a lot in case someone would say they need something. I also did something else. Of all my guys that I was contemporaries with, I was the only one who always wore a collar. Get the kid with the collar on, get the kid with the collar. So I thought, okay, I got to stand out somehow, because it's such a transient business, especially in the beginning. You'll be on shows where all of a sudden you see a new person on set today who's working as a grip or an electric or whatever. The heads all stay the same, but a lot of the crew members switch out. And same thing with your runners. The runners change out all the time because a lot of guys are like, I'm way above this. Fine, leave. It's like, or they're trying to control the set. Like, well, if I'm doing I had someone say this to me once, if I'm doing the work, I should decide how it's done. And I said, okay, are you insured? No. Well, then shut the F up and do the job, or I'll replace you in 2 fucking seconds. Because the thing is, there's a lot of things we do that don't make sense, but you have to because of insurance or because of certain processes or because of certain union rules, which a lot of this is going to change now with the coronavirus. If we're going to reduce crew sizes, the unions are going to go through the roof. And this is all being discussed right now, this stuff. Things, what you need to do, whatever job you have to stand out at that. And that's not sucking up. It's doing the best job you can. I was asked this my whole career when I was just producing stuff, and people always say, well, how do you become a producer? I said, I was the best runner I could be. And then I was the best coordinator I could be. And then I was the best production manager, and then AP, and then line producer. And my whole life I've been a line producer, but when I started my own companies, I sold other writers' work. So I was an EP on everything I made, but I can't write worth hell. Early in my career, I directed and wrote a couple things. And if I was to say they were mediocre, I'd be bragging. I just didn't have that gift. And that's another thing. You have to realize what your gifts are. Everyone 16, 17 goes to college and goes, I'm going to be a director. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be an editor. You don't even know what that means yet. What it's like to write something that's not your idea and to write an episode on a weekly basis. That is a job. It's a career job, but it's a great job if you can do it. But that's not like you writing your indie movie where you have something in your heart and you really have the ideas and it's all means something to you. When you start writing, this week's Big Bang or this week's, This Is Us, those aren't your shows. You're just a writer on it. But you want your shows to get made. If you're writing jokes for late night, you're writing 75 jokes a day and you're lucky if they take 2. So it's like this idea of what you're going to be, you don't know what it is yet. And I tell everybody that I teach or if I've met with, I always say this: if you've been doing this for a couple of years and realize you don't like it, leave. It's not failure. This is your life. This is your path. This is what you're doing for you. I liked it a lot. I really did. But it's like a pyramid. I started off with about this many people of my contemporaries, and now it's just like a pyramid. There's only a few of us left that I started off with. At my age, some of them have died, so it's a little different. That's a little different. Yeah. But it is something that I always did. I always followed my own path, right or wrong. When I left Wall Street, I realized I can change anything I want as I go through life. If I don't like something, I'm going to change it. And I adjusted myself within the industry. I do like this industry. There's something kind of cool about it. Seeing something you worked on that people did it. I have a lot of hobbies, and I like it when I make something for people to see and go, that's great. That's where I get my ego fed. TV's the same way, and movies are the same way. You made that. Could you imagine being Alfred Hitchcock and going, I made all these things? It's like, those are going to last forever, what you made. That's amazing. It's like if you built the pyramids and told your mom, I made those. It's pretty impressive. Problem is, you'd be dead now. That's what entertainment is. You're making something, and it's exciting. And you're doing it in a collaborative sort of way, or you should be doing it in a collaborative way. It does get hard when you're working with auteurs.
Yeah.
Everything. And a show that's done television style, you can get done in the matter of months. A TV show, the same TV show done with an auteur who wants to write, direct, edit, do everything, takes you about a year. So it really does make a difference.
Yeah. And the fact that it is collaborative, you mentioned the virus earlier, there's hundreds of people in a tiny room on a production. Physically, how do you see this working going forward?
It's funny you say that. We're all working on documents for that right now. I'm working with a few people around the world that it's going to change. What really sucks is craft services will go away the way we know it.
Oh no!
The best thing about being on a shoot is craft services. It's you're gonna have a problem. Actors have to be on top of each other, and the director's got to get in there. The director will be wearing a mask, and what the actors will not. They will be testing everybody, and since we don't have proper testing yet, they'll be with thermometers and okay, you don't have a fever, so you're okay, which doesn't mean anything. We're realizing right now. I think it's going to be a lot of um, uh, hand cleaning areas on set. I think there's going to be video village will not be what it used to be. You're not going to have 50 people sitting around a couple monitors. That's going to go away. You're going to have less executives coming to set. You're going to have to figure out a way to have less crew members. And that's going to go, the unions are going to go nuts. In New York, when you work with the Teamsters, they have a helper who sits in the passenger side. He doesn't do anything, but you got to have him. That's going to go away. Those kind of positions are going to go away because, if you're shooting two people on camera and they're being mic'd, you have to have three people in your audio crew. And it's like, you don't need that, and that's going to go. This is where there's going to be some battles with the unions because the whole thing is like, nobody gives a shit about paying for this as much as they are like, no one can get sick. Now, if we get the virus and we get the vaccine in the next year, what gets me about this is I'm surprised this hasn't happened more often in the last 20 years. And so I don't think this is the last time you're going to see something like this. Mm-hmm. I think if you see today alone, I got up this morning, the beaches were open. A group of my friends, we all went surfing this morning. By the time we left, they had put red things on top of the parking meter saying no parking. And I asked him what's going on. He goes, we're shutting the beaches down because people are not doing the social distancing. And I see that as people don't follow the rules. Some people think it's weak if you don't follow the rules. Like, really? Because I don't really care to get sick. But I do think this is going to become a bigger issue. No one's coming to work coughing anymore. You're not going to allow it. No one's coming to set. I don't know how many of you guys have done this. I'm going to go to class today. I don't feel good, but I got to go to class because I can't not go. Bullshit. You're not going anymore because it's too much of a risk for the people around you. Nobody wants to get sick. I do think we're going to be wearing masks a lot. I do think we will not get, I'm really curious about this, trying to figure this out right now. But if you have celebrities right now, A-level celebrities that are on your show, I don't see us shooting anything with them until 2020. Because if these spikes keep coming back, I don't know if they want to take the risk yet. Now, I know crew members want to be back tomorrow because they need that money, but people who have money might want to wait a step more. Also, there's another question. If you're a studio and you go back into business right now and someone gets sick, who knows what lawsuits are going to happen? So it's like, who's going to be the first studio to start spending a lot of money right now? Everyone wants to get back to work right away, and we all need to. But I think the virus is going to tell us when we're really going back to work. Mm-hmm. We just open up all the states right now, and if there's another huge spike, I don't see people going back to work just yet.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I do think that there'll be less people. You're going to have to observe the social distancing. Lunches will be with much more tables and chairs. They will not be sitting next to each other. They'll be further away. I think there'll be more shuffling the schedules. If you don't need to be there at a certain time, you're not going to be there. But what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of little mistakes happen for a while because you're used to having a bunch of support around you. That's going to get reduced a little bit. Lunches will be served in boxes and handed to you. You eat them wherever you can. It's just going to, like, little things are just going to change a lot. And it's funny, though, when I talk about lunches and craft services, I'm only half joking, but I'm telling you right now, if you have crappy craft services and bad lunches, your crew revolts. So it's going to be an interesting thing if we're going to, put together snack boxes or have people bring their own thing. There's talk that what we want is all the crew members to bring their own bottles and stuff they can refill with water, with like in the bathrooms where it's automatic. I think you guys have that even at Northridge. There's a place where you can put your bottle and they load up in some of those water stands. So I think we're going to see more of those things happening. It's those kind of things are going to change a little bit, and people are not going to get together. I do think the first shows that'll come back will probably be reality shows.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I've heard talk that there's a few of the reality shows that are looking to be back in production in June.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Right now, though, everybody is waiting to see they're following the government rules. So if the governor says you can't, have certain crowds, they won't be going into production.
Right. Wow. One last question for you, John. And before I get into that, I want to remind the audience that we're taking your questions. So go ahead and get those in the chat box at the bottom.
Hope I'm not boring you.
No, this is great. And I really, really appreciate your time. This has been really, really amazing. Just one last question for you before we get to the listener questions. If you could do anything you wanted, I think you'll like this one. If you were the king of Hollywood and you could do whatever you wanted, no restrictions, no holds barred, what would
answer that question and keep my job? Because
what would you change about the industry?
the industry?
Yes.
I'd have every fucking suck up thrown out of it and burned. That is where I have the biggest problems. There's two types of people in this industry. There's those who want to make great shows and build companies, and there are those who want to self-promote themselves to death. Now, if you go into the business, you still need to be friends with those people because they will bury you and you won't even know it's happening. A friend of mine that I've worked with for years, Ken, said to me, John, he goes, Johnny, our biggest problem through our whole career is we didn't hang out with people we didn't like. And it's true. Like, there's certain people who, it's in every industry. You have people like this. They throw people under the bus and they're lying constantly. And they get away with it for years. And then one day they get caught and then they never work again. I've seen that too. You know, some come back, but for the most part, but these people aren't stupid. They're smart. They're manipulative. They're whatever. Leah, I like this much better than your other picture. Your other picture's sort of frightening. It's just like when you're laying down. Sorry. I hope that's not insulting.
No, it's fine. I've been trying to change it. And
I thought it was real at first. I'm going like, this girl hasn't moved yet. But it is, I do think that's the one thing I would really want to change, because I think, look, there's certain filmmakers who I don't really care for their work, but I admire the fact that they're making what they want to make. And I think that that's important. Look, if it was The World Was Mine, every show on TV right now would be Family Guy and American Dad. I don't think the world wants that. So that's why everybody has different tastes in what they like. And I think that that's what I do love about the business. What I hate is when I see someone who's really put all their work into it and got everything signed off and going forward, and then someone else burns it because it helps their career as opposed to whatever, to making, it's still art, whatever you want to say. There's a lot of companies that said, we're going to do everything by data. Relativity said, we're going to do everything by data. Relativity doesn't exist anymore. There's still an art form to this industry that we're in. And if you don't believe that, it's not going to work, because everything by data doesn't work. You can have all the data in the world. What is the greatest show in the world? And say the greatest show in the world right now is, or movie in the world is The Avengers. If you made, Johnny Galecki, the Robert Downey Jr. part, that is a different movie. All the research says it's going to be a great movie, but there's other moving parts in it that you can't constantly all know what the research is. If you put Arnold Schwarzenegger in the part of Frodo, it doesn't work. It's like so there's so many things. I'm taking extremes, but but they did do twins. It was him and Danny DeVito. It's like all these things matter. So I think that using data is great, but I think people need to honor the art of it more. And on the production side, people always say, well, production always says no. Production doesn't say no. What production says, we ain't got enough money to do what you want. Here's 3 options. And you can, if you have your own options, let's do it. But we don't have enough to do what you want to do. I'm not saying no. I mean, we got to figure a way around this. And that becomes it. What's more important to you? Do you want to see the city burn to the ground? Or do you want to extend this love story? Whatever it is, you have to figure that out. But I do hate people who are not there to help, to be a positive influence on the growth of the company you're working for, or to help the creative on the shows you're working on.
Yeah, I hope everybody's taking notes. Don't be that guy. Now we'll begin the subscriber portion of the show. This is where we're going to take questions from the live virtual audience. It's all of you guys. If you'd like to hear the rest of the show, you can subscribe on the Anonymous Production Assistant Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/TAPA. That's TAPA.